So the other day I did a video that was a flashback. It was what we saw in Ukraine 1 year ago. Actually, it was the day before. It was 1 year and 1 day ago, and it was about the Russians talking about we're going to nuke you, right? Well, they keep talking about it even today. So I thought it'd be interesting as I was putting this away. I was thinking, wait a minute, here's a weekly review that I did a week ago today. It is June 3rd, 2024. This is the weekly review that I did on June 3rd, 2023. And let's just walk down memory lane if you want to join me. Okay, here's what we had to say.
Last week, just 1 week to another, last Friday to this Saturday, and actually a lot has happened. It's pretty amazing how much has happened. So when I go back and I look at last Friday, that is, what I'm doing is I'm going through the articles that I've flagged and read, or major themes that I've read, and just trying to give you a sense of what has happened week over week. So last Friday, the 26th of May, the West was trying to find a new model for security called the Porcupine model. This is maybe something different than NATO, but just building up Ukraine so strongly that they can't be attacked. I don't know that.
And now that's happening in real time today. At least 10 nations, probably 12 or so, have signed on to these bilateral defense agreements with Ukraine for 10 years. And so that's actually coming to fruition as a bridge until NATO.
That's necessarily the best approach. I think they should be in NATO. I think they're going to be so well versed in both Soviet and Western weapons that to not bring them into NATO is almost foolish. I understand the Russians' concern, but they've forfeited any right to have a concern at this point with the way that they've behaved. The U.S. may provide ATACMS. They're actually considering it, and that's a long way now that they have Storm Shadows.
Well, okay, they have ATACMS. They've had ATACMS for a long time, and they're kicking butt and taking names with ATACMS. And now that they're able to, it looks like the gloves are off, where they're going to be able to use it into Russian territory around the contested areas around Kharkiv. We'll see how that all plays out. But we're at this point, a year ago, well, are we getting them? I hope so.
ATACMS aren't that big of a bridge. Russia is selling Zelensky's Crimean penthouse apartment, and the idea here was that they were going to be giving the proceeds to wounded Russian servicemen. How much of that money will actually go there as opposed to the pockets of an oligarch is yet to be determined. Russian strikes a medical facility in central Ukraine. I read this week that they struck like 900 so far since the beginning of the war. That's just absolutely terrible.
You can only imagine what that number is now.
Lawmakers were pushing Biden to send long-range rockets beyond the ATACMS, other long-range rockets, and Boris Johnson was meeting with Trump to discuss Ukraine. Now, I haven't heard anything as a follow-up of that, and Trump has not seemed to indicate any additional turn in his thinking, but I'm sure that Boris was trying to convince him of taking the right path. Okay, Saturday, the 27th of May.
Well, it doesn't look like that worked out so well. Neither him nor Cameron nor anyone who's try to convince him of that.
Wagner mercenaries began withdrawing from Bakhmut. Remember last week we had Prigozhin's very weird ranting in his interview when I was trying to explain, like, he's not doing this just because he's being weird. He's actually doing this for a reason. Russia carries...
Yeah, this was like 2 weeks before Prigozhin's victory march, freedom march to the coup, whatever it was called, depending on the perspective. Yeah, that's about 2 weeks, 3 weeks away. About that.
Out a missile and drone strike, and Medvedev says the conflict will last for decades. So this drone strike thing, they've been doing like day after day, every other day or so, massive drone strikes. The International Bar Association on Saturday called for a special tribunal. And there's more of these that are coming. You're going to see later on this week, we had another article about something along these lines. And Russia had attacked more, there it is, there's the article I was talking about, more than 900 medical institutions since the invasion began. Now, you're not supposed to attack schools or residences or medical institutions, but this doesn't stop barbarians from acting like barbarians act.
Hmm.
Sunday was an interesting day. Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, meets with Zelensky and talks about, hey, this is the best money we ever spent, and it made the Russians flip out. I mean,
Yep.
they were more upset with Lindsey Graham than they were with a drone strike in their own city in Moscow. Okay, so
And then Lindsey Graham was good until about November, December, where he started getting shaky. And then when the Republicans started saying, no, 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 we want the border stuff, he went right along with that. And yeah.
um, Ukrainian building onshore wind turbines, and they're actually building more onshore wind turbines than what England is in the same year. Now they have this influx of money to do this, and the turbines are actually probably a good idea in the sense of it will continue to generate power when other things are shot down, but it can be blown up too. It just depends on whether they want to. But the Ukrainians have this really interesting cultural characteristic that I've only observed since the war began. They tend to just, and Starsky pointed this out when I interviewed him. Wherever they go, they tend to improve things. Like they can be in a dugout, in a shelter, in a dirt, and they're still trying to make it feel like an apartment, and they keep working at it. And yeah, some of these will get blown up, but some of them will keep generating wind and power. So
Yeah. So two things about that. Remember, like 4 days ago, I showed you the image of the missile that was one end of the clothing line. And that was quite an image. And then the other thing, those wind turbines, I wonder how many of those are actually functioning, because it would be cost prohibitive to go after a small wind turbine compared to a electrical station. That doesn't mean that they won't use it or do that, but I wonder how many of those are actually still functioning now that they're down like to 80% or 90% of power is just gone.
the Russian ambassador says we haven't started to act seriously. I don't believe it when he says something like that, because like if you could have taken Ukraine by now, you would have taken Ukraine by now.
True story.
Prigozhin says that the Kremlin is blanking him on state media, but that's Prigozhin talking. He's gotten plenty of press. Maybe so. Look, I said that he was Putin's mouthpiece in what he was saying, but he's Putin's mouthpiece as long as Putin wants him to be his mouthpiece. And when the winds of the autocrat shift and he wants to favor this person as opposed to that person, he'll do it. So whether he's
And that's exactly what played out. Putin favored his generals over Prigozhin. Prigozhin's now dead. That's what happened.
liking him or not, or whether it's just in his head, or whether I don't know. I don't know what to say, but people were using that as evidence that he was not speaking as Putin's mouthpiece to attack the military leadership, and I just don't see that, and I could be wrong.
So I might have been wrong, but Prigozhin went too far. As long as Prigozhin was within the limits, he was fine. Once he crossed that line, he was a dead man walking.
This is my theory, and I'm pointing out the difference between my theory and the hard evidence that I see. There's another large drone attack on Kyiv on Sunday. Okay, Monday, Russia issues a warrant for Lindsey Graham. Like, it's almost comical how bad these guys are. They're just so offended by that. They're not offended by killing innocent women and children who didn't do anything to them in Ukraine, but they're offended by Lindsey Graham saying it's the best money we ever spent. 15th missile attack on Ukraine in May on Monday. Zelensky submits a list of sanctions to Iran. If I read that article correctly, this was a list of sanctions that were supposed to last for like 50 years for what Iran's doing in helping arm Russia. And as Iran does this, Israel comes closer to Ukraine because they can't stand Iran. Iran is a mortal enemy.
And so what's happened in that year time? That year time was, what was it, October 7th, November 7th? I'm trying to remember where it was, what day it was that Hezbollah, not Hezbollah, yeah, no, Hamas attacked Israel, and then months later, Iran shot all those missiles at Israel. So, yep, they can't stand each other.
Erdogan wins re-election. That's important. Erdogan's not a friend of Ukraine. He's not a friend of Russia. He's a friend of Erdogan and Turkey. And
It's Erdogan, but okay, it's pronounced all kinds of
he
things.
will, if you can trust him to follow his own interests, and some of those interests will align with Ukraine. And so, like the grain deal that aligned, and so where you can find that alignment, you want to pursue it. Ukraine will focus on become a focus in the Republican primaries, and I think the Republicans are having this conversation in the United States right now about, okay, so so the majority of the country supports Ukraine. Most of the candidates except Trump support Ukraine in a significant, full-throated kind of way. DeSantis is a little less whatever.
So who I was talking about were all these people that dropped out early on, and then Haley. So all the little name recognition candidates that they got like 1 to 5%, something like that. Those were the ones that were supporting Ukraine. They're all out. And then it was DeSantis and Haley and Trump at the end, and then just Haley and Trump at the end. And yeah, there they are.
But so Trump is on the other side of that equation. Now, it's one over here and a bunch over here, and so that could actually help Trump win the primary, but then you can't win the general if that's a big topic, or obviously it's not the only topic, but you're giving more reason to lose the general. So they're having this conversation. I know that they're having this.
Okay, let's do a little update here. So I don't think Trump cares about that because it's not as high a priority to Republicans as something like, say, the border wall or the economy and inflation. And so it takes a low priority, even if it's keenly held by some. It's a lower priority to many Republicans. So he just doesn't care.
Conversation. RT Lavrov says that Russian forces will react to F-16 deliveries. By doing what?
And where are the F-16s? They're not even there yet. I mean, they'll be there maybe in a month or two, maybe, but we're talking about that here a year ago.
Missile strike, you're already doing 15 so far this month. Putin signs a law allowing elections in Russia-occupied Ukraine. So it's fascinating how they have the garb of legality without being legal. So we had an official referendum. Well, it wasn't really official, but you have the cloak of the legality without it actually being legal. You hold a gun to people's head and say, vote for us, and okay. But they continue to do that as if that somehow justifies it. Lukashenko, this was terrible. Lukashenko, he's the president of Belarus, promises nukes for countries that join Russia and Belarus. So Iran, Syria, whoever wants to join the party, whatever authoritarian dictators want to join with them, we'll provide you some nuclear weapons. Now that's enticing to a low-level dictator in some African country or something to, right? I mean, think about that. It's enticing. Oh, I'll have nuclear weapons. That's a terrible idea. But what Lukashenko is trying to do is trying to increase the threat of deterrence. And again, Putin has deterred the West very well, unfortunately. Okay.
So Putin continues to deter the West. Even now, I mean, we're just getting to the point 1 year later where Biden has said, okay, limited strikes into Russia. So that nuclear deterrence you got to give Putin props for that. He's done well with that. But nobody joined Lukashenko's party. Like, there have been no takers that were like, yeah, I'll take the nuclear weapons. They know what would be up.
Okay, Tuesday, May 30th, drone attacks hit Moscow again. So it's the first drone attack was just hitting the Kremlin. Here's drone attacks, that wave. And we're trying to figure this out for days, like what happened. And different people had different theories about it. Putin came out. So I was looking at this and I was going, something is not right. Something's not adding up. If it's this, then that doesn't work. If it's that, this doesn't work. So I didn't think it was a Ukrainian strike from Ukrainian soil because like Jake Bro talked about this. Air defense certainly would have gotten it. Air defense can't be that bad, right?
Well, turns out it could be that bad, and it was the Ukrainians. I mean, who knew? Like, my assumptions were, of course they can't. I mean, of course they wouldn't be able to do that, but apparently.
And I didn't think it was a false flag because the Russians would play up a false, if it was a false flag, they would get a lot of press out of it, but they try to downplay it in their media. I was watching RT and reading Pravda and that kind of thing like a hawk, and I just couldn't see it. It looks like it's not false flag, and I don't know if it's partisans launching within the country or Ukraine working with someone or Ukraine doing it, but I don't think it's a false flag. Okay, but it was just really weird. There was another article about how Wagner was recruiting on Twitter and Facebook, and those recruitment things would be taken down after some time after they got flagged, but yeah. Okay, Wednesday, the 31st of May, U.S. announces more military aid, another $300 million package. Russia says that the U.S. is encouraging terrorists to strike on Moscow. You're not a terrorist if your enemy that you invaded in a time of war, you can call it a special military operation that you want, if you want, is striking your capital. Now, they shouldn't be striking a civilian population, but they weren't actually striking. I thought about this at some length, and these things were sending a political message. We can get through your defenses. Your defenses are terrible, and we can get through. But what they should have done was drop blue and yellow dye on these buildings, or paint, or something like that. That would have been absolutely awesome. No charge that you're trying to actually hit us, just showing that you can do it, and yeah.
But then you can charge them with vandalism instead of terrorism. Now, by the way, they're using the same terrorist language again and again, and they were saying that for anyone who has given to support the Ukrainians against Russia. So if you have donated, you would qualify, according to something I read just this last week.
Yeah. Russia said on Wednesday that it sunk Ukraine's only warship on the 29th. Ukraine had no navy to speak of, but as I indicated in the community tab, there was another video I did on day, I think it was 144, about how many ships Ukraine has actually sunk without a navy. It's pretty impressive.
And this was before all the big hits started happening in the fall. It really ramped up about 3 months, maybe 2 months after this.
Okay, on Thursday, June 1st, Ukrainian soldiers are preparing to retake Bakhmut. They said fear is contagious, but so is courage. And that's the way these guys process. It's really amazing. We found out that Russian missiles and drones had a 90% failure rate in when they're launched from Russia into Ukraine. 90% failure rate. It cost $1.7 billion. Now, this was the other article I was talking about, that U.S. lawmakers are...
Now, there's a little caveat there. They don't mind if it doesn't hit its actual target, because if it hits some other commercial building or some family's dwelling or whatever, that's good too. That's sowing terror. So it's not really a 90% failure rate. It doesn't actually hit where it's supposed to, but it's still doing psychic damage.
Pushing for an independent international tribunal separate from the ICC. Now, there's, I think, a reason for this is that, like, neither Russia nor the United States recognizes the ICC as having binding jurisdiction over them. The United States does not want the ICC to say, U.S. soldier, you come and stand before this court. No. We prize our freedom and our independence too much to allow that international body to have that power. I know some people in Europe don't understand that. From an American point of view, as a conservative American particularly, that resonates with me, and I get it. But a Nuremberg-like independent tribunal, totally fine with. I think that is the way to move forward with that. But even then, I don't even want that. I want him to stand trial in Kyiv for all his crimes. Anyway, okay, Ukrainian incursion into Belgorod again. Now, RT calls this a terrorist attack that they thwarted, and yeah, sure they did. Another Russian bombardment of Kyiv. Finland provides 6 breaching vehicles, tanks with bulldozer kind of shovels on the front end to demine the area. And we're still, again, at this point, still trying to figure out who's behind the drones. And then yesterday, just a few articles. Russia thwarts the Belgorod attacks, according to the Ministry of Defense. But there's other news that they're still there, or at the same time that they were saying that, they were still out there causing havoc.
That's talking about the Freedom of Russia Legion, which is fascinating that we're talking about Belgorod 1 year ago today. And what we're talking about is Kharkiv and Belgorod today.
He was at the Moldovan European summit doing what Zelensky does, driving up resources and recognition for what's going on in Ukraine, keeping it front and center. And then the last thing was Scott Ritter, and I talked about this yesterday. Go back to my last video, Scott Ritter on RT, Waging the Peace. It was a piece of work is what it was. Scott Ritter talking about, like, I was trying to be kind, but dealing with his assumptions and saying, look, he really believes this, but is this true? And I don't believe that Ritter is a grifter. I don't believe he's on the Russian payroll other than, selling his books or having a warm, welcome audience. I believe, and this is far worse, he really believes this nonsense. So that's the week. I hope that that helps you. It's less than 15 minutes and you are good to go. Thank you.
Okay, so what do you think? I mean, it was really interesting to take that trip down memory lane and see what was happening and those updates. And man, we're still talking about some of the same exact things 1 year later. All right, that's all that I have. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.